On the evening of December 2, 2010, at around 7 p.m. in Melbourne, Australia, a maintenance worker made his way to the garbage room in the service area of a residential high-rise on St. Kilda Road. When he attempted to open the door, it refused to move, as if something on the other side was blocking it. After several tries, he managed to force it open slightly and, feeling uneasy, contacted the building's concierge. They returned together and reviewed the access logs before entering the room. The lighting was faint, throwing long shadows across equipment that appeared to have been moved from its usual position. Strange scuff marks were visible on the floor, and nothing looked as it should have. Near the garbage chute, the hatch at the room's entrance was not properly secured. They spotted broken debris and what looked like a faint, smeared footprint. Choosing not to enter, they left the door slightly open, recorded the time, and alerted the building manager and emergency services. Shortly afterward, access to the floor was locked down. The elevator was placed in service mode, and security sealed off the corridor. Meanwhile, residents upstairs went about their evenings, unaware that something deeply disturbing had been uncovered just below them. As the two staff members waited quietly for police to arrive, neither yet understood what lay behind that door. Phoebe Hansjack was born on May 9, 1986. From an early age, she possessed a vivid imagination, creating entire worlds as a way to express herself. Known for her warmth and friendliness, she naturally drew people in. She led an active life, loved playing basketball, and flourished in outdoor activities. The ocean became her refuge, a place where she felt calm and connected to nature, especially when spending time outdoors with friends. Yet beneath her energetic and cheerful exterior, Phoebe struggled with quiet vulnerabilities during her teenage years. She experienced emotional lows and experimented with illegal substances before later turning to alcohol to ease her anxiety. These challenges eventually led her to seek professional help through therapy and prescribed medication, hoping to restore a sense of balance. Phoebe embodied both carefree joy and deep reflection. In social settings, she was often the center of attention, smiling, engaged, and full of life. In more private moments, however, she became thoughtful and introspective. At home, she was a steady presence, loyal, selfless, and reliable. She was especially gentle and protective of her siblings, who trusted her completely. By the age of 23, Phoebe had secured a position as a front desk administrator at a salon. The position was a natural fit for her. She appreciated structure, managed her duties with ease, and connected easily with nearly everyone she met outside of work. Art became her refuge, the way she worked through her emotions and understood the world around her. To Phoebe, life's true value wasn't found in possessions but in experiences, relationships, and shared moments. She had a clear vision for her future. Phoebe was determined to travel abroad and take part in volunteer missions in India. It wasn't about sightseeing, but about making a difference, discovering purpose, and gaining meaningful life experience. She actively researched opportunities, carefully planned her journey, and was preparing to turn those plans into reality. During her school years, Phoebe wasn't remembered for popularity or flair, but for her dependability and her ability to bring people together. Her resilience was deeply rooted within herself. One of her most trusted confidants was her grandmother, someone she could speak to openly about everything: her ambitions, her fears, and even the treatments she was undergoing. Her grandmother listened without judgment and provided constant, unconditional support. Phoebe's life existed in a careful balance between outward vitality and private struggle. Her warmth and ability to connect were sincere, yet behind her smile was someone working tirelessly to stay grounded. That internal conflict influenced both her relationships and her reliance on emotional support during difficult periods. In 2009, while working as a front desk manager at a salon, Phoebe met 39-year-old events promoter Anthony Hampel. He came from a prominent Melbourne family. His father, George Hampel, was a retired Supreme Court judge, and his stepmother, Felicity Hampel, was serving as a county court judge. Anthony moved within elite social circles, carefully building connections and meticulously shaping his public image. That autumn, Phoebe moved in with him at the Belinska Apartments on St. Kilda Road, a luxury high-rise boasting more than 80 units. Round-the-clock security, a gym, pool, sauna, spa, and an on-site restaurant. It was premium real estate with apartments valued at up to $1.5 million. Their home sat on the 12th floor, offering expansive views over the city's parklands. Anthony's life centered on corporate events, networking dinners, and constant engagement with influential figures. A world defined by status, refinement, and presentation. Phoebe, by contrast, prized a simpler life. Time with friends, creative expression, and nature. As they began living together, those differences grew more pronounced. In the beginning, however, their relationship was driven by mutual attraction and curiosity. Anthony brought her into his world, but it was one shaped entirely by his own tastes and expectations. Gradually, the dynamic began to change. He started commenting on her clothing, discouraging her from spending time with certain friends, and pressuring her to conform to his high society lifestyle. According to her family and mental health professionals, Phoebe began to feel increasingly constrained and confided in those closest to her. The emotional toll continued to grow. Phoebe described feeling verbally controlled, as though her decisions were constantly questioned or redirected. She often expressed that she wanted encouragement, not limitations, and remained determined to preserve her independence. This led to a repeating pattern: brief stretches of calm and reconciliation, followed by escalating tension and conflict. Each time the strain resurfaced, Phoebe would raise the possibility of leaving. Her family was aware of those moments, as was her therapist. At one point, her grandmother gently advised that if Phoebe truly wanted to leave, she should do so calmly and on her own terms. Phoebe tried to pull away from Anthony's world, refocusing on her personal projects and attempting to establish clear boundaries. Any progress she made, however, proved short-lived. The tightly controlled environment of their apartment, paired with Anthony's high-profile social circle, created an appearance of stability that only intensified her sense of dependence. Anthony's family took a strong interest in the relationship and even suggested formalizing it legally, an idea Phoebe's family strongly resisted. For Phoebe, it was a matter of principle, the right to choose for herself, to decide whom to trust, and to live life on her own terms. In late November, Phoebe had a video call with her mother, who knew she was planning to leave Anthony. Her mother was surprised to see Phoebe still at his apartment. When asked about the state of their relationship, Phoebe silently signaled to stay quiet and avoided answering, claiming they were simply watching a movie in the other room. The following evening, the couple joined Matt and Julia Rockman for dinner. During the meal, Phoebe attempted to discuss the issues in her relationship with Julia, but Anthony quickly interrupted and changed the subject. After dinner, in the underground parking garage, a heated argument erupted. Upset, Phoebe walked away and reached out to an old friend, arranging to meet for drinks. According to that friend, they spent about an hour together at a bar in a calm, relaxed environment. During that period, Phoebe's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Anthony called her 27 times in under an hour. Feeling overwhelmed, she impulsively threw her iPhone across the street. Later that evening, Phoebe arrived at her mother's home, where they had a serious, in-depth conversation. It wasn't about salvaging the relationship, but about planning a safe way for her to leave without further conflict. Phone records later confirmed that the next morning, Phoebe returned to the apartment she shared with Anthony. What followed was a string of calls for help. She reached out to the crisis team at Alfred Hospital, as well as her doctor and therapist. During a 30-minute session with her therapist, she opened up about her substance use and the escalating tensions in her home life. She wasn't merely venting. She was actively seeking guidance on how to avoid relapse and prevent the situation from worsening. The events of December 2, 2010, were later reconstructed using building access logs, surveillance footage, and Anthony's own statement. He claimed he left the apartment around 8 a.m., with Phoebe still asleep at 8:45 a.m. An email was sent from her computer shortly thereafter. Over the next hour, brief periods of activity were recorded on her account. At 11:43 a.m., a fire alarm was triggered. Security cameras in the lobby and hallways showed Phoebe calmly leaving the building with her dog. There was no sign of panic or urgency. The alarm was later determined to be false. There was no scheduled drill or formal evacuation. At 11:50 a.m., Phoebe re-entered through the main entrance and took the elevator back up to her floor. That was the last time Phoebe appeared on surveillance footage that day. Around 6 p.m., Anthony returned home and immediately noticed that something was amiss. Shards of glass were scattered near the desk, likely from a broken item, and small specks of blood were visible on the keyboard and surrounding surfaces, including a stained mousepad. A torn pillowcase lay on the couch. There were no signs of forced entry at the front door or in the kitchen. Phoebe's purse, wallet, and keys were still inside, but her phone was missing. 2 used wine glasses sat on the dining table, yet there was no indication that a meal had been prepared. No plates, no silverware, nothing set out in the hallway or living room. Faint streaks on the floor ran from the desk area toward the apartment entrance. The source of the streaks and marks on the floor could not be identified. Near the front door, a large shoe print was found, significantly bigger than those typically left by maintenance or cleaning staff. At 6:51 p.m., Phoebe's father attempted to call her iPhone, but the call went straight to voicemail. Just a minute later, at 6:52 p.m., Anthony called her father, claiming he didn't know Phoebe's whereabouts and that her phone was missing from the apartment. Meanwhile, he continued communicating with friends and colleagues and placed a solo food order at 8:10 p.m. The delivery driver informed a resident that police were already present near the service corridor. Only after that did Anthony go downstairs to speak with officers, reporting that Phoebe was missing and that he had been unable to reach her. Up until that point, Anthony had neither filed a missing persons report nor contacted emergency services. The building's trash system was a vertical chute, deep and narrow, running from the upper floors down to a maintenance area in the basement. It measured roughly 130 feet in height, beginning around the 12th floor where Anthony and Phoebe lived. The chute had a heavy metal hatch with an automatic closing mechanism and a narrow opening. At the bottom, bins collected the waste. It was through this chute that Phoebe fell. The fall was devastating. She struck the metal walls on the way down before landing in one of the bins, sustaining severe injuries. Her legs and pelvis were shattered. One foot was nearly severed, and the impact caused extensive internal bleeding. Despite the severity of her injuries, medical reports confirmed that Phoebe's vital signs were still present. After the fall, she landed near one of the large trash bins. Remarkably, despite her catastrophic injuries, she managed to climb out of the container and onto the concrete floor of the garbage room. Blood trails on the floor indicated her efforts to move and orient herself. She was unable to stand because of her injuries and the significant blood loss, yet the marks showed that she repeatedly shifted positions, attempting to make her way toward the door. The room was completely dark, with no windows, and the light switch required manual activation. Phoebe relied solely on her sense of touch as she inched forward through the darkness. Eventually, Phoebe's strength gave out, and the trail of movement ceased. A pool of blood collected beneath her, marked by the imprint of her hands, evidence that she had remained conscious and was fighting to survive until the very end. The medical examiner concluded that her death was not instantaneous. She had remained alive and aware for some time after sustaining her injuries, ultimately succumbing to acute blood loss. The combination of trauma, shattered bones, ruptured blood vessels, and internal damage made long-term survival impossible. Yet her body had struggled to persevere. One unsettling detail emerged during the investigation. Phoebe's jeans were found pulled down to her knees. This was inconsistent with a typical fall, where clothing usually remains in place, and this anomaly was never fully explained during the inquiry. Her final moments were spent in total isolation. The trash room was heavily soundproofed, so even if she had screamed or called for help, no one would have heard her. No residents reported noticing any unusual sounds. Essentially, Phoebe was trapped in complete darkness with no means of assistance when law enforcement arrived. Officers quickly determined the situation and prevented paramedics from approaching the body. This decision made it impossible for medical personnel to establish the exact time of death or how long Phoebe had survived after the fall. The first responding officers immediately classified the case as self-harm. In those early hours, no neighbors were interviewed, not all surveillance footage was collected, and the building's CCTV system, which automatically overwrote recordings every 48 hours, was not paused. A staff member even recommended preserving the hard drive, but that advice was ignored. Later, the hard drive disappeared entirely, along with any data that might have revealed Phoebe's final movements inside the apartment. Critical forensic procedures were skipped. The used wine glasses weren't collected or analyzed. No fingerprints were taken, bloodstains went unexamined, and the blood spatter patterns were not properly documented. No effort was made to trace the source of the shattered glass. A large shoe print near the front door wasn't photographed or recorded. Door frames and windows weren't tested for trace evidence. Key electronic devices, including laptops and a desktop computer, were never seized and remained accessible and unsecured. Phoebe's phone was never recovered, and Anthony's devices were also not confiscated. As a result, valuable digital information, activity logs, drafts, and unsaved notes, was lost. Building access that evening was only loosely controlled. While an entry fob was technically required, anyone accompanied by a resident could bypass security without leaving a digital record. Law enforcement never attempted to reconstruct Anthony's potential visitor activity that night. Guest access logs from the front desk were never requested, nor were they cross-referenced with elevator or key card records. Staff observed that some visitors could have entered without leaving any trace, even as the service area remained secured. The apartment itself was never fully sealed for a proper forensic investigation. Anthony continued to move freely, taking calls and receiving deliveries, introducing secondary contamination that disrupted microscopic evidence and compromised the reliability of any later reconstruction. Officers did not record the condition of Anthony's clothing and shoes upon arrival, nor did they collect control samples to compare with the unidentified footprints inside the apartment. The self-harm theory was established alarmingly quickly. Within just a few hours, and official statements began to heavily favor this explanation. The case files offered no clear justification for such a rapid conclusion. Even without a note, documentation of planning, or any evidence of intent, the case was swiftly categorized. By the end of the first week, investigators lacked a coherent timeline of movements or actions. Yet the notion that Phoebe had voluntarily climbed into the chute was widely accepted as fact, despite the absence of solid evidence. This assumption became the foundation for all subsequent conclusions, making it exceedingly difficult to re-examine the case. The official finding later classified the incident as a tragic accident influenced by substances. Phoebe's toxicology report showed a blood alcohol level of roughly 0.16%, about 3 times the legal driving limit in most states, along with traces of 1 or 2 sleep aids. The prevailing theory suggested that she had cut herself on glass inside the apartment, become disoriented, picked up a bag of trash, opened the chute hatch, and somehow ended up inside. However, this explanation was met with skepticism by Phoebe's family and independent experts. First, the design of the chute hatch made that scenario highly unlikely. The opening was narrow, around 8 inches wide, with no handles and an automatic closing mechanism. Even volunteers attempting to replicate the movement under supervision struggled and required assistance. Second, the pattern of Phoebe's injuries was more consistent with a fall in which her arms were at her sides, rather than raised above her head. As would be expected if she had entered voluntarily, no fingerprints belonging to Phoebe were found on the chute hatch or surrounding surfaces, an important inconsistency with the theory that she climbed in herself. It was also confirmed that she had not taken out the trash that day, further undermining the idea that the fall occurred while disposing of garbage. These points significantly challenged the official account. One particularly troubling detail involved the position of Phoebe's clothing. Normally, when someone enters a narrow vertical shaft on their own, clothing stays in place or gets caught around the hips. However, reenactments by independent experts suggested a different scenario. If a limp body is pushed through the hatch by 2 people while the lid is forcibly held open, the jeans can catch at the knees, restricting leg movement and making it easier to push the body downward. That scenario matched the condition in which Phoebe was found. Linear bruises were present on her forearms and wrists. Police suggested these were caused by striking the walls of the chute during the fall. However, independent experts retained by Phoebe's family concluded that the marks were consistent with being forcefully gripped. Despite this, no thorough investigation was ever conducted to explore this theory, such as analyzing grip positions or defensive injury patterns. The official explanation involving alcohol and sleep aids also conflicted with the practicalities of independently accessing the chute in an impaired state, where coordination and motor skills would have been significantly compromised. Operating a spring-loaded hatch, holding it open, and maneuvering into it would have been extremely difficult. Independent experts confirmed that attempting these actions sequentially under such impairment would have been nearly impossible. Forensic trace evidence showed no handprints or grip marks on the inner edge of the hatch or the nearby wall, areas where anyone attempting to climb in on their own would logically brace themselves. Additionally, the body position required for self-entry, with arms raised overhead, did not match the angle of the initial impact, as indicated by Phoebe's injuries. While the glass injury might account for the blood found in the apartment, it did nothing to explain the absence of her fingerprints on the hatch mechanism. Forensic pathologists supporting the accidental fall theory relied on her toxicology report and the absence of classic struggle indicators, such as skin under the nails or torn hair, to justify their conclusion. Critics pointed out that the flawed initial investigation, with missing fingerprints, unchecked areas, and uncollected samples, meant that no violent scenario could be confidently dismissed. Determining the time of death was also a major problem, due to the circumstances and delayed medical intervention. Experts could not accurately align biological indicators with a specific timeline, and in cases like this, knowing the exact time of death is often crucial for confirming or ruling out certain versions of events. In Phoebe's case, that critical window was lost. Anthony's behavior in the immediate hours and days following the incident drew attention for troubling reasons. Officer Justin O'Brien observed a disconnect between Anthony's display of grief and the physical signs typically associated with crying. There were no visible tears, no redness in the eyes, and no indication of a runny nose. When it came time to give a statement, Anthony insisted on typing it himself, claiming he could type quickly. During this process, his emotional fluctuations ceased entirely. He appeared calm, focused, and composed. Meanwhile, someone from his social circle alerted investigators to another inconsistency online. Anthony behaved as if everything were normal, yet in front of visitors, he would adopt a visibly mournful demeanor, seemingly adjusting his emotions to suit the audience. When Phoebe's grandmother visited the apartment, she was struck by how staged it seemed. Nearly all of Phoebe's belongings were gone, leaving only a few carefully arranged photos of the couple visible to her family, giving the impression of a deliberately curated portrayal of their relationship. Phoebe's friends also reported feeling pressured. One friend, Ellie, received an email from Anthony asking her to vouch for the loving nature of his relationship with Phoebe and to share that narrative with others. Ellie refused, stating that she couldn't speak on Phoebe's behalf and that Anthony's claims did not reflect the truth. Around the same time, a colleague of Phoebe's named Christo began frequently appearing at the building's concierge desk. He often brought snacks and repeatedly suggested that Phoebe had been struggling with severe depression, claiming she was beyond help. These visits continued for roughly 2 weeks. Staff members later described the interactions as feeling like an attempt to influence their perception of the events. Anthony's personal life outside his relationship with Phoebe also drew scrutiny. A colleague, whom he had portrayed as strictly professional, appeared in photos and messages indicating a more intimate connection. Phoebe's circle did not judge this morally, but saw it as a potential distraction that could have influenced his focus or behavior. During arguments and periods of separation from Phoebe, Anthony was surrounded by a network of influential people, relatives, business associates, and close friends, who acted as a protective shield. They provided legal counsel, promoted a narrative favorable to him, and worked to block uncomfortable questions from Phoebe's family and friends. This appeared to be a deliberate effort to control the story and suppress alternative explanations, highlighting the clear imbalance in resources and influence. Any subsequent investigation was effectively conducted under conditions advantageous to Anthony, making it far more difficult to challenge the initial findings or push for a comprehensive review of the case. Phoebe's parents and grandfather, however, refused to remain silent. Her grandfather even went so far as to conduct a series of physical tests on the trash chute himself. The findings were compiled into a formal report and submitted directly to the coroner. Simultaneously, Phoebe's parents requested a second, full-scale forensic sweep of the apartment, but their request was denied. Authorities cited earlier investigative decisions and argued that any subsequent examination would likely be compromised by contamination. The family formally documented their objections and appealed to higher-ranking officials, urging a reevaluation of the initial response and the scope of evidence collection. Their efforts followed strictly procedural channels. They filed motions requesting expanded forensic analysis, petitions to preserve digital evidence, and formal inquiries directed at building security and maintenance personnel. The family also compiled a detailed timeline of events and submitted it to investigators, asking that it be considered alongside alternative theories. Additionally, they took steps to raise awareness, alerting stakeholders to key gaps in the investigation. They pressed for meetings with department leadership and requested reassessments of specific investigative procedures, but their efforts were met with form letter responses that reaffirmed the adequacy of the original inquiry, citing the preliminary conclusion: an accidental death influenced by impairment. By the time the case reached the coroner's court, Phoebe's parents and grandfather had compiled an extensive case file. This file included the results of independent chute tests, communications with the property management company, police correspondence regarding attempts to access digital accounts, and a growing list of missing or lost evidence. Their core argument was straightforward. The case was incomplete and should not be closed with so many inconsistencies, oversights, and unanswered questions. The coroner's inquest represented the family's final opportunity to seek formal acknowledgement that Phoebe's death was not merely a tragic accident. Judge Peter White spent several months reviewing the evidence, hearing from experts, police representatives, attorneys, and the family. He faced a central question. What actually happened in December 2010? Was it self-inflicted, a tragic accident, or a criminal act? The official forensic pathologist maintained that Phoebe's death resulted from a fatal combination of alcohol and sleeping medication, a conclusion that aligned conveniently with both law enforcement and Anthony's family. This explanation provided a straightforward narrative that avoided examining the possibility of third-party involvement. Phoebe's family presented counter-evidence, including results from physical reenactments of the chute scenario. Their attorney, Jamaican, argued that the physical evidence indicated interference by another person. However, the judge dismissed these claims, acknowledging significant flaws in the initial investigation, but asserting that they did not alter the core finding. In his view, Phoebe's death was deemed a tragic accident rather than an intentional act, bringing the case to a close. No criminal investigation was reopened for the family, and this decision carried further repercussions. Most notably, it prevented them from seeking international assistance to access digital data in the United States. For example, Gmail records could not be released because there was no legal determination of a crime. Years later, when the family finally obtained partial access to Phoebe's email account, they encountered a frustrating reality. Many messages had already been permanently deleted. Anthony acted quickly, filing a claim with Phoebe's superannuation fund to request a death benefit payout, citing their domestic partnership. His father, George Hampel, a retired Supreme Court judge from Victoria, submitted a sworn declaration supporting the claim, falsely stating that the relationship had lasted longer than it actually had. In the end, Anthony received roughly $113,000, despite strong objections from Phoebe's family. He later transferred the funds to her brothers, but the gesture did little to ease tensions between the families. For Phoebe's loved ones, the coroner's ruling offered no real closure. It only reinforced what they had long feared, that the truth had been obscured by legal formalities and the influence of the Hampel family. Once the legal proceedings concluded, a new conflict arose over who had the right to make decisions regarding Phoebe's remains. Anthony refused to identify her body, leaving that heartbreaking responsibility to her parents. At the same time, his stepmother, County Court Judge Felicity Hampel, told Phoebe's mother that Anthony should be recognized as her next of kin, a statement that left the family stunned. To Phoebe's family, It felt like an attempt to exclude them from decisions about their own daughter. What followed was a painful and deeply symbolic outcome. There were not one, but two farewell ceremonies. Phoebe's parents held a service at a former monastery along the river, where friends and family who had known her for years gathered to share memories of her childhood, education, and dreams. The atmosphere was quiet, heartfelt, and filled with sorrow. Anthony and his family held a separate memorial at a yacht club, displaying large portraits of the couple and delivering speeches about love and a bright future. To many of Phoebe's friends, the event felt staged, omitting the real history, the arguments, the emotional tension. Neither Anthony nor his family attended the cremation or the placement of Phoebe's ashes. Later, subtle signs began to emerge, suggesting that not everyone close to Anthony fully accepted the official story. His sister, Chrissy, became involved in a high-profile investigation related to banned substances. While she avoided formal charges, she posted a cryptic message on social media. "My only hope is that one day the truth comes out." Though vague, the words carried weight. For Phoebe's parents, the post felt like quiet confirmation, evidence that even within the Hampel family, not everyone believed the matter was truly resolved. Time passed, but Anthony's name would resurface in connection with another tragedy. In June 2018, 25-year-old Bailey Schneider died under circumstances that eerily mirrored what had occurred years earlier. She was a vibrant young woman from Melbourne. She was outgoing and deeply connected to her family and friends. Not long before her death, she had confided that her relationship with Anthony had reached a breaking point and that she was ready to end it for good. On the morning of June 24th, Bailey Schneider was at home, texting on her phone while her parents stepped out to run errands. When they returned, they discovered her on the kitchen floor near a cabinet, with a looped cord around her neck. There was no high anchor point nearby, and the arrangement appeared unusual. Police quickly classified the death as self-harm, but Bailey's family immediately had doubts. She was tall, around 5 feet 10 inches, and there were no fixtures in the room that could have supported a conventional hanging. Authorities also failed to secure or examine the phones during the critical early hours, and later it became clear that some data had disappeared. Investigators never reconstructed how the loop could have tightened in that confined space. Independent experiments conducted later suggested that such a setup would have been extremely difficult, if not impossible, to carry out alone without significant force or assistance. None of these findings, however, were reflected in the official reports. The investigation stretched on for more than a year and ultimately ended the same way, once again ruled as self-inflicted harm, this time for Bailey's family. To many, it felt like a second devastating blow to young women connected to the same man. Both had reportedly told loved ones they planned to end their relationships shortly before their deaths, and both were discovered under circumstances that raised serious questions. In each case, police conducted only surface-level investigations, critical digital evidence disappeared, and both times the official conclusion was identical. The official account claimed the victim had taken her own life, yet the stories of Phoebe, Hans Jack, and Bailey Schneider became intertwined in the public consciousness. Was it mere coincidence, or did a pattern emerge? One in which key evidence vanished too quickly and a predetermined narrative was accepted before all possibilities were thoroughly explored. To this day, Phoebe's parents and Bailey's loved ones have no clear answers. The truth remains elusive. What remains for them is unresolved grief and the name Anthony, connecting both tragedies in a way that continues to provoke questions. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.